Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Hello, and welcome to the Technically Friends podcast with Harrison Wolf and Timothy Reuter. I'm really excited for today's show. We'll be joined a little bit later by Elyse Lipman, the CEO of Liman Farms, a fourth generation family owned produce company. But before we speak to her, I'd love to hear a bit from Timothy on updates from his life and, you know, remind everyone here to please like and review and then subscribe to this podcast on whatever platform you're using. It helps us reach more listeners, and that in turn lets us keep doing this and introducing you to our friends. So, Timothy, how are you doing?
Hey, Harrison, it's good to see you.
Timothy, it's always a pleasure. It's been a little while since we chatted last. How's life? What's this picture in your background? Did you do some art recently?
Yeah, I've been experimenting with cricket art.
What's
So
cricket art?
basically trying to use sort of cut vinyl with a cricket machine on wood. And this is done in the style of Kazimir Malevich. So a Soviet abstract expressionist who I like, trying to make stuff in a similar style to him. And I've been
That's
doing
cool.
3D printing in the style of Piet Mondrian. So looking at how I can use these new tools to recreate old masters and eventually create stuff in my own style.
I didn't realize you had such a passion for Soviet artistry.
They
Where'd
make
that
good
come
rockets. I thought maybe they could make some good art.
from? Fair. I'm listening to this book called While We Yet Live, and it takes place in Warsaw the days before the Germans invade, and it follows a British spy, basically, a British woman who comes from a spy family, and I think ends up taking on that role again as she's in Warsaw and the planes and tanks are coming in. So it's quite interesting. I guess it was made into some movies, but there's definitely some Soviet flair going on in my life right now as well.
Very cool. And it's hard to escape the patterns of our families. My kids are off building things. I drove two of them to robot camp yesterday, just north of Boston.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so we'll see what they come back with. Hopefully no world-conquering robots, just the small ones to start off.
Yeah, no, certainly. And I head to DC next week for the Drones and Advanced Air Mobility Policy Symposium. So a blast from our past together.
Yes.
Yeah, DOJ, DOT, NTSB, NTIA, a bunch, all the 4 and 3 letter organizations will be there talking about Part 108, so the new Beyond Visual Line of Sight rule. And it should be very, very interesting, laying out sort of the path of the next 5 or 10 years of regulation, finally.
Two predictions. When do you think the first commercial AAM, Advanced Aerial Mobility Service, that a human can ride in is going to launch? And when will drone delivery be coming to your house?
To my house in New Jersey, in suburban New Jersey.
Yeah, which actually is a decent area.
Could
to
be.
Do it.
Yeah, New Jersey is the most densely populated state in the country, or most urban state. But so that might be an issue. But I'd give it, before they're here, I'd say 5 years.
Okay.
And the first paid AAM, like get into a flying taxi with a pilot or without a pilot?
With a pilot, because I think they're going to start off with pilot.
I would say that already exists in Blade. They have their helicopters that fly around New York, and you can just like schedule it. But if you're talking like eVTOLs and like electric
eVTOLs,
aviation,
that is what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Then I would say Dubai probably in the next 3 years would be my guess. Definitely the Olympics is going to have something. Archer and Joby are both slated, I think, to work with the...
Although we've heard this before, right?
Yeah.
Because the Paris Olympics were supposed to have Volocopter, and I'm very sad about that one. I liked the leadership. I believed in them.
Yeah, you met the leadership. I think we both did, right? Was that Florian? Was Volocopter?
Yeah, Florian Reuter. I think we referred to him as the better looking and richer Reuter.
And we still do. Yeah.
Yes. But then he passed it on to Dirk Hoke,
Right, from
You know,
Airbus. Yeah.
former CEO of Airbus Defense and Space. I mean, a really credible person. They had the fewest technological leaps, I would say, required, right? They intentionally did something fairly straightforward and it didn't happen. I mean, I still believe this is going to happen, but it rhymes a little too much. Oh yeah, the next Olympics, it's all coming together. On the other
Yeah.
hand, obviously Archer and Joby are much better funded than Volocopter.
Well, Timothy, it's great to catch up. I see that our guest is here, so let's bring her into the conversation. I would love to welcome Elyse Lipman to the show. Elyse recently became the CEO of Lipman Family Farm, a fourth generation privately owned produce company. We're excited to continue these conversations with friends and colleagues of both Timothy and I. And as a reminder, these are folks with deep expertise in some aspects of the technology industry who've achieved, some success in their field. And in general, these are people who are on their way up. Not quite the C-suite, but the manager who is navigating their career, someone who, sees themselves in the C-suite someday. But unfortunately, today we are breaking our rule and bringing a good friend who recently became the CEO of the produce company Lipman Family Farms, continuing her family's fourth generation in the business. I think it's safe to say that our guest today, Elyse Lipman, kept us sane and successful during our time launching the World Economic Forum Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution in San Francisco. Elyse, who at the time led content creation and experiences at our global center, was responsible for making sure that our teams were able to create meaningful experiences with and for heads of state, tech visionaries, business leaders, while also ensuring that we were achieving our mission of shaping the technologies of the future while mitigating the risks of those technologies to society. Elyse was always someone you could depend on to listen to your perspective, consider it, and provide real, straightforward feedback that'd be helpful, if not very direct. Everyone needs an Elyse in their network of friends. Elyse, I will say, as Timothy and I prepared for our conversation today, that we went to your website, and it's amazing. I didn't realize how much I wanted to know about a produce company's history, the people, the produce you all produce. And I guess the focus on visual interaction should not come as much of as a surprise given your background. You've been a photography editor for National Geographic, a strategist at the World Economic Forum, and an amazing presenter and teacher of how to present, and a global leader focusing on emotional intelligence, and again, even recently becoming a mother. So, welcome to the podcast. I can't wait to catch up and to dive into just how you've gotten to where you are and learn a bit more about how you stay motivated by balancing a family, having friends, and your farms. So from your farm to our podcasting table, Elyse, welcome.
Excellent. Thanks, Harrison. Timothy, it's just great to be here. And I want to congratulate you guys on this podcast and among all the things that you guys are tackling in your own lives. It's awesome to catch up.
Well, thank you. And to start things off, can you tell us a bit more about Lipman Farms and what it does?
Yeah, absolutely. So Littman Family Farms is a fourth generation family owned company, but we've evolved a lot since those origins. It was started by my great grandparents, Max and Ella, and they were immigrants living from Poland, living in Brooklyn, New York. And the story goes, Max was a peddler. So he was taking on all these odd jobs, and he'd come home to Ella and frankly complain a lot of the time about his back and how hard things were. And anyways, one day Ella broke open their savings, gave him $100 and said, "Stop complaining about this, Max. Go out and do something about it." So, Max, he couldn't read or write, but he had a knack for numbers and he had a very critical asset, a cart. And so he started wholesaling produce into the Washington Street Market in New York. And it was very soon after that he saw the opportunity and moved the entire family to get closer to the source. So that's when everyone moved south down to Florida. And in 1948, we planted our first tomato. So we started as these field tomato growers in Florida. But since then, the company has really evolved. And today we're really a produce conglomerate. We touch all parts of the produce supply chain, truly from seed to shelf. So we have an R&D division where we're developing the varieties that we're using on our fields for tomatoes in particular. On the farming side, we farm across what I talk about the spectrum of farming. So open field, but all the way into high tech, indoor farming. We don't do the vertical farming. Those economics don't really pencil out, but through that spectrum of protected agriculture. The bread and butter of our company today, though, is really in the produce distribution space. So we have 16 facilities across North America where we're packing, repacking, sorting, putting into custom packs that fresh produce, and then also doing value-added services. So we slice and dice and mix and match the produce so to meet the customer specs. We do even have a logistics arm just to help then get the produce right to that end customer. And at the end of the day, our products end up in retail, so grocery stores, as well as food service across the country.
Awesome. And is there, just to clarify, an international component? I was looking at the website and it seemed like you also had a presence in Mexico.
Very much so. So we operate across 4 countries. We're in Canada, the US, and Mexico. We do deliver into Canada and Mexico markets, but the primary market is the United States.
And what's the 4th country? You listed
El
Canada.
Salvador.
Got it.
We have grower partners that we work with and a presence there.
Fantastic. It sounds just like a really interesting dynamic that not a lot of our listeners or me would be aware of in terms of how do you get, vegetables and fruits to your table from the growing location. You mentioned sort of the technology piece of this, not vertical farming, but some of the other innovations that you're looking at. Where do you see sort of the future of farming? Like, what are you excited about, sort of innovating in?
Absolutely. I mean, it's really the angle that brought me back to the food system, right? Working at the World Economic Forum with you guys, and then ultimately back to Lipman, was looking across the food, in particular the fresh produce space, and the opportunity where technology is really transforming, every element to that. So how we grow, distribute, and even as consumers, right? How we're selecting our food today is drastically changing. So what is really appealing and exciting about Lipman is because we're vertically integrated. That's very unique in the produce space. Now, I even work in the industry and I still find myself, I know that I still take for granted, what it takes to get our produce from the field to our plate. From the time you pick a tomato off the vine, you have about 3 weeks, only 3 weeks, right? And that's a completely field green tomato, the ultimate, the maximum to get it to, your stomach before it just dissolves on your plate kind of. So it's very fast paced, and then technology does have a lot of opportunity. The flip side to that is that, of course, it is perishables, it is low margin business, right? So the opportunity for technology to really achieve and then maintain, right, those benefits, those optimizations is challenging. So for myself and at Lipman, again, because it's vertically integrated, that's where our model allows us to capture the value and the benefits of technology and see those benefits all the way through the supply chain. Where I'm most excited is honestly all the way back at the beginning, the R&D that's happening in the seed development space. So this is where, right, and we've had a breeding program now for 22 years on our field tomato varieties. And the goal with that program when we started was to maybe one day have 50% of our tomatoes, be proprietary blends. And today it's over 95% of the tomatoes that we farm ourselves, we're using our own variety. So that is because that's where the technology, and these guys, I love hanging out at the R&D lab, right? They're telling me CRISPR is so 2019, right? It's using all these different leg technologies and double haploid and machine learning and AI, all the things to really accelerate the pace of development here. It's not just for the consumer characteristics, which are important. It's taste and flavor, right? And color of your produce. But it's fundamental. And for us, it's how do you optimize for the growing conditions? So we're able to then develop the varieties that are most disease resistant, right? That are most aligned with the climates that we grow in, and being able to optimize, again, the different growing environments that we operate in. So that is absolutely where I think there's the most potential to impact the produce space.
That's fantastic. It sounds like, there's a lot of opportunity for growth on the biological side. I was thinking much more, in my mind, it was robotics and it was, pruning of weeds and scanning and things like that. But to hear that it's the biologicals thing, the side that comes first is fascinating. I think we lost
That's
Timothy.
the part
Hopefully
that
he's
I'm
back.
most excited about. I mean, there is also, and your space, Harrison, drones on the field, and there's a lot of excitement around ag tech in
Hmm.
general. There's definitely a lot of, hype around the fully automated farm or the data. And we have a proprietary ag tech software that, again, it's one thing for these technologies to exist, as you and I well know. Being a 75-plus-year-old company means that we have the institutional knowledge, but more importantly, right, actual data of 30 plus years of farming, that we have been able to upload, into our ag tech software. So absolutely we're finding, and that is first and foremost an opportunity for like a management tool, right? To really on the farm. Of all of those technologies, robotics are fun to think, are good to think about. Obviously, labor is a major challenge and sort of ongoing need in the business. But the drones piece is really what we're most excited about on the field.
I think so. One of the questions, I guess, that I'm fascinated by is organizational change and like making sure that, it's one thing to invest in technology, it's one thing to hire, the smartest folks. But for an organization like yours that's been around for 75 years, oftentimes those can be the most difficult institutions to dramatically change. And I know that's something you've been very passionate about in your career is making meaningful change and organizational change. How do you see the success in your own company? How have you been a leader for that?
Great question, I think. I mean, it really hits to something that I think has been an arc in my own career, and then is fundamental to where I am and as a company. But yeah, in my career, I think I've always been attracted to large institutions, whether that's big brands like National Geographic or again, global reach like the World Economic Forum. For me, I always wanted to build big things. And working for a big organization was a way to, have that foundation, right? I mean, my husband's an entrepreneur, you're very entrepreneurial. That is a whole other bent. For me, it was the appeal of working off of something that is already bigger than myself, that is already established, right? And then what can we do to continue to build on that impact? But then to be that entrepreneurial, right, agent of change and to recognize like what got us here won't get us there. And you've got to constantly be pushing that status quo in order to stay relevant. So, very much that I think is the crux of my role today. And as CEO, as a family member, as an outsider really to the industry, right? I didn't grow up in the business, in the industry specifically, even. It took me a while to really I think embrace that and to recognize the value that lens bring. And it's fundamental. So as a company, we've succeeded. And there's a lot of, it starts with really understanding what has driven that success, what has gotten us here, and to not dismantle that, right? But there's a fundamental tension there. How do you, at the same time, try and push an organization forward, challenge an organization while still respecting what's been so successful, right? And so for myself, that really starts with, again, truly understanding and taking the time, right? But to truly understand the winning elements of a company. And at Littman, and I think at most companies, you can call it trite, but it really is. It does come down to the people and the culture. There's something my COO and I speak about this company. We talk about the soul of this company, right? Again, it is bigger than any one person. It's certainly bigger than myself. And I think being a family owned business, that I stepped into this role embracing that and knowing that, right? I'm working on something that the goal is it for far to outlive myself, right? For my daughter, for future generations. But it's not just my family. Today, we only have 3 Littman family members that work in the business. We have about 4,000 employees. So we've got dozens, if not hundreds, of families that work in this company and have already been with us, for decades plus. So you have that mentality, and I think that's a really lucky, privileged place to be, right? It gives you that different perspective. And you also have the respect for the past, right? And to recognize that there's a great gratitude for what's come before, that we all really stand on the shoulders of many giants. And so how do you how do you balance that? So there's not one formula, that's for sure. But I definitely think you've got to first and foremost understand the winning elements of what got you here. And then as you go forward and look for the opportunity to change and to constantly challenge like the status quo, absolutely ask the why, ask the questions. And that's where outsiders, can have a positive impact because they have that fresher lens. But then as you go forward, right, that you're kind of always circling back to that North Star, that you're always clear as to the values and the direction of a company.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about tariffs and how are you being affected by tariffs so far and what will happen to your business if they go up?
Yeah, I mean, we live in an age of excitement, drama, uncertainty. No, absolutely. No, the biggest concern, the biggest tax on any company today is really the uncertainty, and I think
Mhm.
that that's felt by all and that's, appreciated by all. And for Lippman, I mean, we're in the fortunate position where we can weather these storms. And I think that, that's my strategy. That's our strategy is again to in times of uncertainty and volatility, we're going to be the partner of stability, right? And stay focused on what we have long identified and certainly more recently under my tenure really identified as our strategy and priority, which is surety of supply, right? And that
Mhm.
means that no matter what kind of comes our way, we need to be able to have different levers to pull. So making sure that we're diversified in terms of where our product is coming from. In terms of the tariff specifically, right now produce is protected under the USMCA agreement. And I fundamentally, believe that that's important. And I know, a lot of people do. The administration recognizes that completely. But our food systems are intricately integrated, especially our produce between US, Canada, and Mexico. And so, that's not changing anytime. That's not going to kind of unravel or be impacted.
Could American farmers benefit from this in some way? I think a lot of people are sort of trying to figure out how to think about this. Should we be growing more of our tomatoes in the US? Does that benefit anyone? Does that make American farming more secure? Or does it just make tomatoes more expensive for everyone? How do you think about this?
Yeah, well, this country, really, this country was built on agriculture. This country, still, the foundations of the economy are very much in agriculture and in food. The best situation at the same time is that free and fair trade. Pricing based on competition and market dynamics, that definitely should be and is the goal, right? That's the way that certainly I think everyone wins in the end. But the truth
That's
is
not how
that
agriculture wins at all. Works at
Huh?
all. I mean, agriculture is one of the least market-based industries in this country, right? With lots of subsidies and tariffs and, can you import sugar? I mean, this shouldn't be a show about economics, but I'm just curious because you're talking about the benefits of market-based dynamics, but I think agriculture is one of the most protected from market-based dynamics industries in the country.
Well, there's certainly, there's inherently a lot of factors, right? And the reality is there's a lot that's out of your control in agriculture. So absolutely, right? And the reality is that if we need to feed more and more people with fewer resources at the same time that basic headwinds that are required for farming, and this is even on the far indoor side, my indoor farmers complain more about the weather than my field farmers because it impacts humidity. And right, this industry, there's a humility built into farming inherently. And so there's a lot of factors in it, which is why all the more so we, whether you say we as a country, as a population, as an industry, we need to have multiple levers going on. You need to have multiple sources. So yes, on the one hand, having food and produce produced domestically, look, it is a national security issue. We need to be able to support ourselves and feed our population and be self-sufficient in that way, right? But the truth is that only 1 in 10 Americans get their recommended dose of fruits and vegetables every week. So that screams to me a major need, right? And a major opportunity. And it's challenging to fix. So we need to not only produce more vegetables, but also be able to move those vegetables to the various markets and communities, and all in a way, by the way, that makes that tomato or pepper or strawberry more affordable and accessible. And the only way to do that is to encourage competition, is to, again, open up the playing field and make it at the same time a fair environment.
This is super interesting, and I think comes at a really interesting time around the international geopolitical context and conversations. I'm going to take us a little differently. I'm just going to say that I personally am fascinated by the way your career journey has gone. On the one hand, being a photo editor at one of my favorite magazines growing up, National Geographic, to where you are today. Is there anything you look back on and say, man, I am really glad that I made that decision? And it was a hard decision because there were a lot of ways to go. Is there anything that sticks out in your mind in that way, or like, thank goodness I did that, or thank goodness I didn't do that and went this other direction?
Yeah, that's a good way to frame, looking back. Going all the way back to the beginning, a lot of credit goes to the Great Recession, actually, thank goodness for no. But the reality, I graduated in 2009 and was in the middle of all these. I was young and idealistic, and ambitious. And anyways, I was in the middle of all these interviews with huge companies, and they froze. They froze all the interviews at the time. And I thought that was devastating, terrible. What am I going to do? But you're faced with uncertainty, right? And for myself, that really forced me to focus, to recognize whatever I was going to do is going to take risk. Um, and it's what then drove me towards journalism. And, looking back on that, I started applying to jobs outside the States. I moved to South America for a couple years. In the back of my mind, National Geographic was always the goal, but it was more about, really being able to articulate why that company, why, this direction. I mentioned before, but I was really attracted to working for big brands and to build upon something that was bigger than myself. I mean, at the time and still today, even though it's a very different reality. I mean, I can't imagine a world without a National Geographic, right? But the path to get there was very non-linear. So journalism is already a very scrappy industry. Then you compound on top of that all of the changes that were going on, that still go on in terms of what constitutes publishing. And every company, right, is a media company today. So the business model was really being challenged. If I hadn't been faced, first of all, with that real uncertainty, I think coming out of school early in my career, and then really set myself, down that path and continued to take a lot of risk with that. At the end of it, I did have a great opportunity and a breakthrough, role where I got in at National Geographic. And then frankly, because of all of the disruption that was happening at the magazine and then in the industry, I had a good amount of opportunity and became a photo editor there at the end. That wasn't a certain moment and a certain point where I knew it wasn't about ending up necessarily in that one box, right, or that one role, but that the path I had carved for myself was going to take me somewhere positive. When you're unsure of your path, right, when it's nonlinear or you're not sure where it's leading, I think it's that we're building more than we can necessarily see by just putting in the hard work, right? And staying focused on, or at least staying grounded as to kind of your why, what's driving you, and why are you waking up every day and kind of spending your time doing the things that you're doing. It's not about needing to understand exactly how that's going to pan out. Uncertainty can come great opportunity.
So I had a very similar experience with the Great Recession, coming out of graduate school at that same time frame. What my dad told me as I was leaving school was, it doesn't matter, it doesn't even matter the direction you're going, just that you're taking a direction, like this, that you're making that step and moving forward, and you'll ultimately walk towards the destination that fits you the best, even if each step along the path doesn't make it seem like you're going in the right direction. And I took that to mean similar to what you thought. And that took me to Bangladesh and India and like getting to travel internationally. So what you said just really resonates quite a lot.
I've been shaped at the same time on a personal level by a handful of health, issues or instances for myself or people that were really close to me. And, you talk about health and we all take our health for granted, but when something goes wrong, it's so out of your control or seemingly out of your control, right? And there isn't always like, okay, take this medicine and you'll get fixed. Or there's not always a clear path with diagnosis or treatment. And so you just have to relinquish yourself. You have to kind of trust that you're doing everything you can and you just that's all you can do. And that's really challenging for people that are maybe type A or competitive or used to seeing results, when you work hard. And so just to know, I think that captures it for me. You're building more than you can see, and you're building towards something, even if you can't see what that is.
Yeah, speaking of nonlinear paths, I'd love to hear a little bit more about the process and conversations that brought you back to Lippman Family Farms after that didn't seem to be the direction that you were obviously heading in.
You are correct. And it's true. I mean, growing up, I honestly never thought I'd work for this company. I was so proud of it. My grandfather was around, and luckily until my mid 20s, I had a great relationship with him. And now I see how I grew up around the business, like with kind of the folklore instilled in me and the values, of the company today. It wasn't in my sights. And my path back to Littman was certainly winding, but I would say so. It's very clear the number one reason that I'm sitting here today, it wasn't just because of opportunity, of drive, but for all of us. I mean, we are where we are because of others who saw me and certainly believed in me and helped me see and believe in this path. The number one person and reason that I came back to Littman was actually the previous CEO, guy Kent Shoemaker, who helped me see this. And so Kent was a non-family member, Lippman from 2011 to 2022 when I came in. And it wasn't just that he helped me to see the opportunity that the company presented, right? I mean, I'd known Kent growing up and again, like, where understanding of the business, but he really helped me see just the uniqueness of Littman and with the vertical model and my interest in technology and even like the global macro strategic lens, really the value that I could bring the company. But he made me understand, I think I had been seeing this company as something to define myself against. I was born into this company. My father, he never worked for the business himself. And that was very almost rebellious by him and his generation. He was on the older side. He was expected to go into the business, and he chose to get out of Florida. It was he had really a very tough childhood with all of that, and it was his decision to head out. So in his words, he grew his hair out and followed the music west, went to California, and like met a hippie flower child that became my mom, and he became a very straight-laced lawyer and, had a great and successful career in his own way. But then message was instilled to us, right? So he didn't want us to feel that expectation, I'd say, or maybe even obligation to go into the business. And the other side was you don't have a job, not to assume that it's just there for you. So he really instilled in us the value of self-sufficiency and wanting to like stand on our own 2 feet. So back to Kent, I think he really helped me flip that switch. So it wasn't this kind of company that I got to be born into and was something I needed to kind of define myself independent of, right? That, wow, here's this opportunity where I could work on something that has given me and my family so much that I could bring real value to and that I could build for and have real impact, for my daughter and future generations to come. So I completely credit, Kent for helping me not only see the career opportunity, but the personal opportunity as well.
Why did he want you? I mean, he's not a member of this family.
Yeah.
Why Elyse out of all I mean, I think you're wonderful, but I'd be fascinated to hear his thought processes to the
Yeah,
degree you can
he would
reproduce it.
we could get him on the podcast. He's a charmer. He's a great guy. No, Ken, yeah, he really is an incredible person, by the way. Talk about a unicorn. Who wants to and does like successfully step into, at the time, a third generation family owned company that was very much run by the family. So that's been this big evolution. I mentioned many fewer Littman's work today, but he stepped in when it was like almost 100% run by a Littman team, and so who wants to do that and then navigate all of those dynamics? But on top of that, he helped grow this company incredibly. He scaled our footprint and grew the company, over 3x in his 10-year tenure, and just was an incredible, really had a great impact on every. So, you'd have to ask him, but
Sure.
no, he had this strategy role at the time. And again, Kent is very, very suave. He understands the family dynamics. And, I wouldn't say necessarily credit this to Kent, but in my own then experience at Lippman and in my role today, I do think a lot about the value of being family owned. And it truly is a value. It's a competitive advantage. There are inherent, again, values and culture that Lippman, and again, that's so little to do with the actual Lippman family today as it is about the people, that again have committed, frankly, their lives to the company and have made this a true family business. Even in our, acquisition and growth strategy, being a family owned, privately held business is unique and more unique these days. And again, yet in order to preserve that takes a lot of work and a lot of investment on the family side and the business side. So Ken had a role. He had a couple other candidates. He said he was interested in what we were doing at the forum, how, technology and really macro trends were impacting the whole produce supply chain. And he brought me in on this strategy role, and again, that speaks to Kent, but people higher up in the organization, he not only kind of sold me on this role, but he brought me in and he delivered. He gave me a runway and he really mentored me and gave me kind of room to flex my and yeah, then I got into the company and frankly just got hooked.
It's really interesting to hear sort of how you've gotten to where you are and your vision for what it means to you in terms of being part of this multi-generational business.
Being a mom, becoming a parent is, seismically transformational, just to your core. And for myself, it certainly brings more perspective and more meaning, right? At the same time, I increasingly recognize that frankly I'm one of the lucky ones. I feel like I get to be a mom and I get to work and I get to work in a job that is really fulfilling for me. And it's something I do think about and didn't anticipate thinking about, but certainly do more and more as I'm in the CEO suite. Growing up, I was told that I could do anything I set my mind to. It wasn't a factor being a girl or a boy or be seen as a woman, right? I just wanted to work hard and just be judged on my merit. And yet now I'm in this role and I realize that being a woman and myself, I have a unique experience, or there's an experience, right, that is unique to being a woman. I'm also more young in this role, right? I'm more that each of us bring a unique experience to the position that we're in. And anyways, I think one thing I didn't anticipate again about being CEO, but is actual very fundamental to the job is just the visibility of it, right? That you really are, that I really am a face of the company, that, the announcement goes out and I got like funnier overnight, right? Like people see you differently because you sit in a certain seat. And while that most of the time makes me really uncomfortable, it's something I'm trying to also embrace in a different way. And I think being a woman in this seat is really important. It's important to have women who are visible. It's important to have parents, right? Talking about those challenges, being a parent, being a mom, being, again, whatever you bring to that role, and for a number of reasons. So for myself, it fundamentally has shifted so many perspectives that I have on my own personal purpose and why I want to contribute to this company every day. But it also really has shifted, I think the importance of those conversations that I used to avoid a lot, right? I didn't want to kind of bring attention to the fact that I was a girl or a woman. And now I just recognize that it really is important thing to talk about. And again, that it's a way to connect with a lot of other women and just people, frankly, on a human level. I have a pretty big like personal update, or it's been a crazy few months. Yeah, so we have one daughter, Ella. She's almost 5. It's a really long journey for us. We always wanted to have a lot more kids, and it was hard after Ella. It was really challenging. So we tried all the things and did IVF for years, and actually through all this CEO transition interviews. So that was a lot. But we're told that it wasn't going to happen, and it wasn't very likely that I would get pregnant. So we were able to make the embryos, and we moved on and we looked into surrogacy, and we found an incredible woman who is now carrying our child. And the kicker is that after we made it down that whole journey, and that takes a couple years, it's a big process and emotional, just to get to that, we have since found out that I am in fact pregnant.
Wow.
We have two things. We have twiblings on the way.
Amazing.
Oh my gosh.
It's incredible.
Congratulations. I mean, it sounded like you wanted a bigger family by more than just one. So this may align with what your hopes were anyway, even if this wasn't how you thought it would go down.
Yeah, I mean, that's it's been such an experience, right? And such a journey. And look, so many couples, women are out there that are struggling, are really, what's more pure in this world but to want to bring a child here out of nothing but love, and to not be able to achieve that is devastating. And, yeah, never saw never saw this being the other side to it, but these babies are so wanted. They're so wanted and they're so loved, and it's going to be wild, but so bring it on. Yeah. But that's coming up. So I'm due actually in about a month, and
Wow.
then our with a girl, and then we have a baby boy coming at the end of October.
Wow.
I am so happy for you, Elyse.
Hey.
Congratulations. And I would just like to also congratulate you on something that probably no one else is joining the 3 Kid Club, which is a very exclusive club. Not everyone is good looking enough to enter into it, but
Well, Story and I are both one of 3, and it's like one kid, each kid is a miracle. Great. But still, you're an only child, right? Second kid, you got a sibling. But it's when you have 3 or more where you start to learn how to form alliances, right? It's like 2 on 1. And when you get really smart, you realize you outnumber, right?
so I actually have an important question here. I've been watching a lot of Succession. I know it's been over for a while, and I'm just thinking, are you going to play your kids off of each other for the future CEO seat?
Oh, I have no expectation that these kids are gonna, want to do anything with the company, but I like where your head's at. We're definitely gonna play with these kids, like we understand the power of 3, and yeah, absolutely. We want to instill those skills, right? Again, yeah, you got to be able to navigate the alliances.
Actually, on a more serious note related to this question, why don't you want one of these kids to succeed you, right? This has been in the family for many generations. Wouldn't you want that to continue?
I myself, to be honest, never thought I'd work for this company. I was so proud of it. And my grandfather was around. I think it's more like with these kids, right? I know where Ella comes from. I know where they come from, but I have no idea where she comes from. Like they're just 100% their own person. And I don't see, my role as a parent to have any real say or real like expectation, like understanding of who she's going to be. It's like I feel like I'm getting to know her a little bit more every day, and how lucky am I? Like this wonderful little person. So anyways, I want to help her be the best person she can be. I don't know what that necessarily looks like.
Ella is how old?
She's almost 5.
Almost 5. Okay, so she is aware of the world and some of the beginnings of the intricacies of the world. Does she have any concept of like mom is having a baby and then we'll also have another sibling?
Amazing. This is fascinating, right? And the experiment is just beginning. Then we can get into the twiblings and how you explain it to them and how they grow up and all this. But yeah, I mean, these kids, right? On the one hand, she has no idea. There's a lot of questions and there's all these opportunities to have real life conversation. Story and I, we just tell her the truth. I mean, we just speak to her like a person and an adult, I guess. But for example, we told her this when we were ready to share with her. And I overheard my cousin was over and he was like, "Hey, Ella, you're going to be a big sister. How are you feeling about that?" And I hear her say, "Yeah, so I'm going to have a baby brother and a baby sister. And my mom's carrying one, and our friend is carrying the other. And we get to have both. Isn't that great?" Like it's also the least judgment, right? She's just like, "Yeah, this is the way it is. I get to have siblings. I get to have 2. Uh, uh, End of story, right? So it's really incredible. These kids, they are learning everything for the first time, but they also don't have that preconception, right? It's important, I think, to talk about, and something I've become very, passionate about, or intentional about, just to speak to, especially like these challenges that I've faced, that my family has faced, and yeah, how that's more common. I think those challenges are certainly shared. Again, we've never had a female CEO at this company. We've never had a female CEO have a baby in this company. And again, it's really important. And my own of that experience, I think now is in a more public space and has the opportunity to connect with and have impact on far more people, which is how I look at it. But how do I balance it? I know we all know it's not really about balancing, and it's really about choices. And I think that that's number one, really setting boundaries and setting clarity of what's important. I mean, there really are so many hours in the day, and if I can connect and commit to my daughter and my family for a set amount of time every day, that feels more manageable. But I know at the end of it, right? I really know this, that being a mom fundamentally makes me better at being a CEO. And working in this company makes me a better mom. Now that's who I am, and it's because it really feeds like a deep part of me, and I am so engaged in, my work, and so engaged with my family. And I'm growing, right, on both sides of that equation. And so I know that that's important for both sides. But again, I think the reality is that we all need to frankly speak more about is that, yeah, it's not about those choices all the time. I mean, it costs a lot to have other people help you take care of your kids. There are real, needs that kids have and that parents have to be connected to one another, and work is a different part of life, right? So anyways, at the end of the day, yeah, I have a lot of people that support me. It truly, truly takes a village on all sides. And I couldn't be in this role. I couldn't be the mom that I am without certainly my husband, my partner, Story, and then the teams on both sides of the equation, the management team, and then, yeah, the village that it takes all of us to raise these little creatures.
Now, one of the things that we always ask before we finish up is, would you say in all of our journeys together that we can say that, we are now technically friends throughout this collegial relationship? And I'm feeling yes, but I would love to hear it from you to, just to reinforce
And
for my
if
own
you want to
insecurities.
reject us on the recording, this is the time for the smackdown where you can tell us what you really thought of us the whole time. That's fine
Finally
too.
getting into the meat of the conversation. I love it. Yeah, no, I so appreciate what you guys are doing. I mean, I think as we, yeah, get older, I just so admire you and those who are trying to kind of take it all on. And how lucky are we just to have such full lives, and to meet others who are genuinely interested in the world and keep, evolving ourselves. So I would say technically that we're friends.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And, Elise, just thank you for joining us today. It was great to catch up. You're not someone that I get to talk with every day or even every year. And so just being able to touch base with you and get your update at a personal level is really exciting. And I really appreciate that. But I think you've given us a glimpse today into of this world of produce that we weren't aware of, the world of, sort of being a woman CEO. And as you said, not balancing, but sort of building those barriers to have a successful family and have a successful career. So I just wanted to say thank you. And Timothy, I don't know if you have anything else that you'd like to add or any other questions, but I'm just blown away by where you are and so happy to have been a part.
Yeah. I just want to say, it's wonderful to catch up. And part of the reason we do this podcast is we've, been lucky enough to work with so many inspiring people. And I certainly feel inspired by the journey that you're continuing on post us all hanging out in that same building in the Presidio together.
Out in the woods in the Presidio. No, couldn't agree more. The feeling's mutual. So thanks for having me, guys.